Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of ClueCon Weekly. Joining us this week is Jachen Duschletta, an old friend of ClueCon Weekly, of the open source community, of Homer, Kixip, and senior solutions architect at. Is it still Kixip, or do you have a new company now? Curin
Nope.
is the project, right?
Burn is the project, Gigapipe is the partner, and Quicksip is the company. Yeah.
Luckily, we all know you and the other team members,
Yes.
so we can just ask you directly. Cool. First of all, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I love being here. Enjoy speaking to you. It's
So
just great.
for the five people who haven't heard about you or Homer and the project, can you just give us a quick intro?
Absolutely. So I'm Jachen Duschletta. I'm from Quicksip, like Luca just said. I'm a senior solutions architect. So what I do is work with our customers, the commercial ones, and work with the open source community to find how people solve their issues and their problems. And I try to learn all the different open source tools we have so that I can help people who want to observe their VoIP stack with the solutions that we have, because we have so many different tools that people can use to look into and see how things are working.
Yeah,
Me.
and I have to say, Homer has always been my favorite tool in the whole voice over IP world and Epic and all the other stuff. So, yeah, maybe we can start. You know what? We have never did a quick history tour. Like, how did the project start, and what was the goal, and how you expanded?
Yeah, I mean, I might not be the person who knows all the details on Homer. I know it started about 4 or 5 years ago. Uh, Probably grew out of the need of actually being able to see and really observe what's going on in the SIP, in the SIP world, and then you know, bringing it into the open source and developing it in the open source space is really the way to get that feedback and that community of like, hey, what do you actually care about when you have your SIP stack? Obviously, our people have lots of experience, and we want to see it a certain way, and that's kind of how Homer really started growing up as the tool that everyone started using. Because hey, the UI is much better than what you see in other tools. You really get to see the calls in a more, let's say, colorful way, because there's colors involved, not just gray. You've got your ladder diagrams and so forth. And then people really just started using it, and then I think a lot of the like Alex and Lorenzo being able to push and help and contribute to things like free switch, being able to add the HEP protocol, this Homer encapsulation protocol that is able to preserve the information of a SIP packet and is able to transport it to some other place for analysis. Being able to implement those integrations into all the greater open source projects, that I think that's a really great push that we're able to do, and bring Homer into the forefront and availability for people to see what's going on in their system. And that's
Yeah, you
always been
can
our
do.
goal.
Yeah, you can do a lot manually, but it's not necessarily easy. Like it's
Yeah.
integration. I mean, at the core, all you need is pocket forking to actually get Homework to work. But how you do it is there's a big difference between installing a module in FreeSwitch and it works and having to figure out how actually because packet forking isn't easy. Like it's not a
Yeah.
simple thing to even understand. It's
Yeah, and it's not always a performant thing either. So I think that's where the HEP protocol kind of shines, because it doesn't require you to do a full packet, copy. It does the encapsulation for you. It takes the information it needs to display it in Homer, but it doesn't do like a full kernel buffer copy. It's lightweight.
yeah, which is extremely important and very high performance. So, what's going on in the projects on the open source side and not open source too? Like, we're happy to know if there's products coming down the pipe, but
Yeah,
open
yeah, of
source.
course. Well, you probably heard of Homer 10. Homer 10
Mhm.
was kind of our approach of seeing what the community wants. Homer 10 is like our R&D release, if you want. So last year we put out Homer 10. It was meant to be more of running everything in the database, running
Mhm.
everything directly in Grafana. So you don't have to have a Homer UI, and you can just go to Grafana, you add the widgets for the flow diagram, you add the widgets for the metrics, and you can see it all in one place. um, that was our approach, and we're like, let's put it out to the community, see how much feedback we get. And really the feedback we got was no, we want the API. We want to be able
Hmm.
to have a separate UI. We want to be able to have more like Homer 7. And so we're really appreciative of the community to be able to step up and say, hey, you might be going in a direction we don't like. And we took that, and we are now working on Homer 11, which is going to be more like Homer 7 again. So it'll have a UI, it will have an API, and gives you the same interaction with PCAPs that people were really asking for, but it still leaves it open with metrics, generating metrics for Prometheus, for example, that you can still have Grafana on the side, like many people do, and then you just use them, together instead of what we were trying to do, put it all in Grafana as the UI.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies at this point have Grafana as part of their core stack. It's just everywhere. Like we use it internally for almost everything, I want to say. So it's probably just that people just integrate the Epic Flow into their own capabilities. But what
Yeah.
else is new in Homer 10 aside from the database stuff?
So
There's a bunch of changes.
well, Homer 11 will have essentially a refreshed UI, right? It will be
Mhm.
more newer technologies. It'll be things that are easier to maintain. Hopefully, also invites more community participation, right? So we're switching to React before we had Angular. That should really open up the doors for more people to say, "Oh, I feel comfortable with looking at this code. I feel comfortable with maybe making a small change here. Uh, maybe it would be better this way," right? It's a lot easier when it's more common frameworks that you use, especially in the open source field. So people will hopefully jump in more, be able to read the code and understand why is this widget not working the way I want it
Mhm.
to. And I mean,
Yeah, I
and
think
at
that.
this, yeah,
Go ahead.
at the at the same time, obviously our commercial product, which is the financial backing of Homer development, is also getting that same refresh. So we're working in tandem. We keep open source separate from our commercial solution. So it's open source is just open source. We don't ever have to hide that stuff that is not meant for the open source community, or we don't have to hide the stuff from the commercial side. We keep them separate, we develop separate, and we just focus on bringing the best features we can to the open source community.
Yeah, it feels like that's the best way to go. We do pretty much the same thing with FreeSwitch. There's a separate commercial for FreeSwitch that used for commercial customers, but the modular aspect of it allows you to just bring in what you need and just leave out some of the things you have in commercial are not really even useful for open source. It's not just the not wanting. I mean, we need to sort of make rent, so
Yeah, yeah,
some
yeah.
of it is kept, but there are sometimes I feel like there are features we just hold back because I mean nobody will use them. Like obscure in our case, it's obscure zip tagging
Exactly. Like
mechanisms
corner
or
case. Yeah.
yeah, whatever. But it will just make things more complicated because if you don't know how to handle those cases, it breaks the whole thing. So it is it's not always just people, oh, you're holding back things. Yeah, some of the things we wouldn't need anyways. It's just
Yeah, and I mean, you gotta be the Robin Hood model that we always talk about, right? The Robin Hood model of the big companies who want to have the extra features that they pay us to be able to have those features, but it also pays us to be able to work on the open source modules and tools that people use anyways. So I think we have to see, if there was no paying customers, then there probably wouldn't be any open source tools, right? So we have to run that balance, and we always take open source as an opportunity to be able to say, hey, look, we have this cool tool. We don't know if our paying customers even would have a lot of use of this, but we want to try it out, right? We have a lot of stuff like with DuckDB integrations that we've been coming out, some extensions. That's stuff that we might not need for our paying customers, but we are interested in it, and we want to see if other people are interested in it. And we are going to spend the time because we are able to, right? We have paying customers that pay for the value that they want and they get out of the product, and we get some of that money and we put it right back into open source and say, hey, here's some tools that we're interested in and that we think people will get value out of. And then, like, Querying, that's actually now the new release of Querying is called Gigapipe. I think it's a
Mhm.
lot easier to pronounce.
Okay, yeah,
But
I'll give you that.
yeah, yeah. But like that's how that started. We were like, what if we have this cool tool that unifies all these different things, Loki, Prometheus, Tempo? What if we have this cool tool? let's put it out there. Let's develop it in open source and see if we can build a community of people who are also interested. And it really, people came and they were like, yeah, this is really cool. I really want to use this. So that's kind of how it, develops and pushes tools forward that are useful.
It's like, yeah, I was reading the project history. It started out as some fork of Loki, which is
Yep.
another, not even a fork, probably just a modification of Loki. And
No, it was actually just take Loki API and turn into something that can be used with ClickHouse database, because that's what we're using at the time, and that at the time it was meant to be just a wrapper to simulate that API. But then we realized that, well, there's other APIs that we can also simulate, or there's other APIs that people use, right? Prometheus, Tempo. Now we have Pyroscope support. There's a few other things like Datadog, Bulk, Influx. There's a few things that we can just wrap in, and they are now supported by ClickHouse. And then eventually, we have the ability now to switch whatever the backend is, because we can just talk these. I think the word we always use is polyglot. We talk all these APIs, and we can return all the API formats, so people can just use one application to power all these different things. And now that we have that, we can also change the backend. It doesn't have to be ClickHouse. It could be something else, right? So that's kind of where the future is going on that one.
so, what's the difference between Curing and Gigapipe?
Well,
If there
it's a
is one.
name. It's a name. It's a name change. That's the first thing. The Gigapipe release of Querying, which is now Gigapipe, is rewritten essentially in Go. So we're offering the higher
Mhm.
performance of Go to people. It's the same set of APIs with some additional ones. And what we essentially offer with Gigapipe, which is our partner company, is that you can also have a managed solution to that. So, before, people had to kind of figure out how to host it, how to run it, what's the best structure to take their traffic. We're just offering now essentially a managed solution in the cloud, and say, if you want to run this, but you don't want to worry about the whole setup, come join us in Gigapipe, set up the Gigapipe in Gigapipe, and we'll manage it for you.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a slam dunk. Like, I'm looking at the plans, I'm looking at the. I've tried. I have to say, I sit in a weird place in the telephony environment because I'm an application developer. I'm used to coming into people more capable than myself, having set up systems perfectly. I just need to make sure things actually work, read the protocols and whatever. I've tried to set up Homer and derivatives a few times. Usually worked it out, but it wasn't too easy. So I want to say that if you have whatever, if you have even, I mean, if you have a need for this, just go use the hosted versions. There's no reason to not do it. It's
Yeah, I think we've all done it. We've all had to set up Docker containers and like, why is it not working? It's supposed to be Docker and supposed to be able to just turn on.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay when you're running a web application, maybe a framework, something which is just a web process in a database, then it usually works out, right? You can figure it out. But this large interplays of services are better left to professionals. It's actually a very good point. So I don't want to say this for I'm not just promotion. It's literally from a developer. Guys, don't try this at home unless you know what you're doing. The plans are cheap. They're so much cheaper than your time. I promise. I swear it is. And the
It's
product
funny.
is great. Like it's
It's funny because last year at ClueCon we did the Homer workshop all about AI voice transcription. And we're like, we built this in 3 months. We built this thing where you can listen to the RTP, we run it through a model, and it gives you the transcription. But it took us a long time to set up. It was really finicky. And I'm like,
Mhm.
at the end of it, we just realized that if you just go to SignalWire and use their service, it's cheaper and it just works. I think that was the big conclusion we had at the end of it, really, that there is people who have spent a large amount of time to make this work and make it scalable, and they're willing to manage it for you. Then that can be a very good cost-effective solution, especially
There's
for
a
like
place for
smaller.
everything.
Yeah,
There's a
yeah,
place for everything. Like even time to market. Like I fancy myself. The only systems things I know very well probably is Frizzwich.
mhm.
I can make Frizzwich do anything in hours. I know where everything is. I know how to do it. Still, I mean, I do also work for a single wire, so I also know those APIs even better, so I can build that
Yeah,
in minutes. But if I
yeah,
had to, I could build out something in Frizzwich. Kind of like you probably have no problem setting up Homer or Kieran or whatever if
no.
you need to do it. It doesn't take. But if you're working on a side project, you're helping a team of friends with a startup getting started and whatever, you're just use the service guys. I don't know. And then they come at you and say, "But you wrote it. You made part of it. Why are you making me?" Because it's just too much work, and it's my go to how I explain where open source, because it sounds like we're talking bad about open source now. Like, what's so if everything's supposed to be managed services, then why is the open source version existing? There's a place there. You have a small scale thing you're building. You have something that's going to eventually grow out. You're just starting out in the business. You're learning. You're doing a few things. You can mix and match some services, etc. But if you're looking at scale, if you're looking at quality, if you want to sleep at night, then you need the hosted services. And it's ultimately, I mean, AWS. You don't need AWS. You can buy a computer, put it in your office, and that's a server. I mean, but
Yeah, but
then,
I think that the good news is there's always going to be different businesses with different people, right? And some people are really good, like you're saying, like there's always those people who are very good at setting something up and they just get it running and they get it going. And those are those are the companies that benefit from open source because they have the talent, if you will, they have the skill set to just go and set up Homer and they're ready to go and it works for them. And I think the managed cloud offerings, they're just really good for those people who say, I'm really good at X, but I'm not good at setting up Homer. Or I'm really good at X, but I'm not good at setting up Gigapipe. But since the X I'm good at is going to make up for the cost, I'm going to go with that solution. I think that's where open source really makes a lot of sense because it gives you the opportunity. Like if you're skilled and if you're talented, you can go in, you can figure out how it works, and you make it work for yourself. But if you don't want to, then there also needs to be that other end. Like I don't want to figure out how to set this up. I don't know, I don't want to be involved in that. Please give me a managed solution. And we're just listening to the community at that point. Like, okay, if there's people who would like to not set it up, then we will offer that service for you because we do it all the time. We set it up all the time. So why would we not, do it for someone else?
yeah, there's levels to it. It's not like one size fits all. You're gonna use a mixture. Even at Signal Wire, we use some external services, some we set up ourselves. So it's just it's depending on your skill level and scale. But I think ultimately, again, the problem is very often scale and reliability. What I always say when I'm teaching Frizz, which is it's gonna work great for 80% of what you're trying to do, and it takes you an hour to get to making 10 phone calls. To get it to make 1,000 phone calls, it takes months. To get it to make 10 million phone calls, it takes years. So be aware of that and work and scale accordingly. You can even use a hybrid approach, like start with hosted, build your own. There's a bunch of ways you can that.
Yeah, it's nice to mix and match now. Um, just trying to think, like our focus has really been in trying to bring observability as a whole back into VoIP more. Like what we're experiencing with the bigger companies is that the bigger companies kind of split the VoIP engineers away from the infrastructure. But really, a lot of the VoIP issues you might experience are related to the infrastructure. And so for us, it really just makes no sense to split those two. Like you have to have observability of information about the infrastructure to be able to say, oh, look, these voice calls just are getting a very bad MOS score on this SBC. What's going on? You need to be able to then go over to the SBC and look at the CPU usage or the RAM usage, and maybe you'll see, oh, the RAM's are overloaded, and that's why all my calls are not being handled, and we have so much packet loss. So I think it's interesting to bring that observability in, and I think a lot of the smaller companies really want to see that because those are the people where the VoIP engineer isn't just handling VoIP only. It's also VoIP and infrastructure. What are my SBCs doing? What are my elements doing? And that's kind of where we're aiming at, with this Gigapipe partnership. That's where we're aiming at with the open source Homer. We have the Gigapipe. It's open source, so install it, have Grafana next to your Homer, and Homer already in Heplify, which is the capture server, the backend server, already emits metrics out, like how many packets are coming in, how are the things going from the SIP side, and then you just put that right next to the metrics that you're emitting back to Gigapipe about your CPU and your memory usage and what is your network interface doing. And if you see them all together, now you have a complete view uh, based on your metrics on, hey, what is my VoIP stack doing? Oh, look, this region always gets too hot. Maybe I need to add a second element. Maybe I need to go horizontally and scale the traffic and split it between two centers instead of have it all in one. Those are things and insights you get when you really add observability into VoIP.
Yeah, that's I want to say observability is probably not probably, like observability should be your number one concern when you're building anything with voice in it. Period. There's nothing else. Nothing else matters. I don't even care if your phone calls work. I'd rather have your calls not work and you know why, if you got what
Yeah.
I mean, right?
Yeah.
Than calls work and you do not know why they're working. That's a terrible way to go forward. Because one day there'll be a call that you will have to figure out, and if you don't have the right tools in place, it's over. It's just
Yeah, and
not good.
we see this happening a lot, where it's people, they will look at the voice traffic in Homer or Hepic, our commercial solution, and they'll say, "Why is it not working? Why am I not seeing, let's say, the buy, right? Why am I not seeing the buy, or why am I not seeing some of the media come through, right?" Well, look at your underlying machine. Is it overloaded? Is there network drops? And that's all stuff that's invisible to them because they're really just focused on the SIP. But now, there's so many tools now uh, in the open source space where you can say, like, well, just give me all the network interface and send it directly to, something like Gigapipe and making a metric. And then now you can really just go see and say, oh, I have drops here. I That might be the cause here. That might be the issue here because I'm dropping stuff. But if you don't have that visibility, you're just going to try to troubleshoot something you don't know about. Like you're saying, like, give me observability first so I can actually tell why things are not going right.
Speaking of Gigapipe, I think it would be cool to explain that it's not only just for VoIP, right?
No, I mean, it's literally just a managed service for metrics, right? That's the goal. Uh, and we're trying to make kind of a counterpoint of, so many people are now charging per usage. So many people are saying, if you use only, so much CPU on a server, then you pay 60 cents per CPU hour, whatever that means, right? And I think our approach has just been like, let's simplify it. Just, we have essentially a set price based on your bandwidth that you were trying to send in. You can go check out the pricing a lot better, but it's just simplified levels, and you just pay for that once and you go with it. You don't have to worry about, oh, maybe this month I'm going to pay 1,000, maybe next month I'm going to pay 2,000. It just simplifies it. And I think it's more like aimed at the companies who are like no nonsense, uh, small, starting out something. They want to really see stuff quick, but they don't want to set it up, themselves. That's kind of what the open source approach is there. And that's kind of the aim of it. Like, here, come here, if you want to try something out, uh, and just throw anything at it, right? Logs, metrics from Prometheus. If you have spans inside, Jaeger spans or Zipkin, you'll send it at that. Pyroscope profiles, that's a really kind of a new development the last couple of years, where you just profile your application right as it goes, and you send the profile to um, Gigapipe, and then you can see how your application's working right
You
as
want
it's
to
working.
know something funny? I did not know Pyroscope existed.
There you go.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like, Go has a lot of tooling into that as well. You can run your Go application that you're developing, and it spits out a profile. And it's super helpful for developers because it immediately says, oh, this function I spend most of my time in, so I got to optimize that function. Imagine doing that right on the go, like you're deploying all these different applications, and you have that profile being recorded in each of your clients and sent back to Gigapipe. Now you look through and you say, well, what's going on at this client? What's different about this client and that client that they have a different profile? And why am I spending more time in this function on this guy when on the other client I'm not? And that really gives you super, super detailed insight into your application itself. And hopefully it can lead to, really good value of why something might not be working for one customer while it's working perfectly fine for another.
Yeah, it feels like it's in this hybrid world where a lot of people, a lot of companies, a lot of our startups are building out AI solutions that, again, there's various levels you can implement at various levels, but more commonly I see people working on a variation of one telephony provider like SignalWire, if they're doing voice. I'm looking at the voice aspect, that's doing the actual voice. Then you get the audio pipe from SignalWire to your own whatever speech recognition AI and bring back. All of that has a lot of moving parts. If you don't have visibility on all of them at the same time, it's, I want to say, impossible to figure out the F is going on. Like that is really just not. It's really not just not there. Like, okay, so I asked a question to my chatbot and it didn't respond. What happened?
What
Did it
happened?
not
Exactly.
hear? Did it not hear? Did it fail to get something back from Gemini, OpenAI, whatever you're using? Did it just fail to speak it back? So everything went well, but I actually wasn't spoken to me, or was the actual phone call? Like at some point, it might be that the audio is not reaching me. So everything's working, but something's not getting to me. If you don't have that stuff in place, it's immediately, I don't say impossible to figure out. It's just deadly. It's
Yeah, and I think that's where it's really nice with Gigapipe because so now I'm talking Gigapipe, the open source product, right? You you install it and you have immediately a way to send logs to somewhere. You have immediately a way to send metrics to somewhere, and they correlate to each other. If depending on how you set up your logs, you can correlate and say, if I am finding this log, click on this button. It will take you over to a tempo span or a Jaeger span of what happened. So your use case that you're describing, right? Like you would see the HTTP calls between each other, the stream being established, and that would be shown in your time frames of your span. But then you say, well, something went wrong here, and it would be correlated to a log
mm,
uh, of one of your elements, and you click on it, and now you see the logs of that element. What went wrong? Oh, error. Couldn't find the
yeah.
file, or error. The socket was closed. That
Yeah,
gives you so
speech
much insight.
recognition stopped working. So
Yeah,
it wasn't hearing you. So that's clearly everything else was working, but nothing was coming in anymore. That's what you really, really need to do. It's super important. Speaking of which, you mentioned something important. So how do you patch into Gigapipe from outside from applications? Because very often the problem is, okay, I want to use it, but I already have a Docker stack with those 10 things, three AWS services, a bunch of other stuff. So how do you send data to Gigapipe in general?
well, so Gigapipe, the product runs, right there in a Docker container next to your elements.
Mhm.
Usually, you have a database that you hook it up to, like ClickHouse. Um, but obviously, you can patch directly via an HTTP API where you just send stuff that way. There's so many solutions now in open source. Open telemetry collector, for example, is the more common one now that people use for telemetry and observability. It supports those things like Vector, which is vector.dev is the place where you have all these different connectors that take data from some place and then can send it out to something like Loki, Prometheus, Tempo. And so you just point those all to Gigapipe that are running either locally or in the cloud,
Mhm.
and all goes in. It just gets ingested and is then available for you to read from. So it's very straightforward.
So in general, you'd use, there's a bunch of open telemetry connectors that you can patch into your Docker Compose. There's a few log syncs, so you can
hmm
just put that in
hmm
your Docker Compose stacks and just ship everything over. That would probably be the easiest way to get started, right?
Yeah, because I think Vector is the easiest. I think, in my opinion, because it just comes preset with all these things, and then it's the easiest to configure. OpenTelemetry collector, it's slightly harder to get the file to work and to everything work out exactly how you want. but it's getting better every month. They come out with some new release that makes it easier to use. But I would say, like, if you just want to start with observability, get something like Vector, and put in like you can pull the metrics from the system that Vector is running on, from the host system, so you can get CPU, mem, disk, and interface network traffic immediately, that, and then just send it to Prometheus and specify your gigabyte container, and that will get you started right away with something that's actionable and valuable to you.
Yeah, I think the again, observability is important. Figuring out how to get the data in is also important. There's a bunch of simple to use collectors. As I said earlier, I sit in between the worlds, so sometimes I don't really know how to handle things. So if there's a ready-made thing you can drop into a Docker Compose stack and it will just ship data over to whatever service, it's the best choice to start with. Then of course you can branch out into whatever you
Yeah, whether it's the
whatever.
managed service, whether you want to do some kind of special clustering, yeah, that's always
So let me
available.
ask a naive question to wrap this up. So we've been talking about network and application monitoring mainly. Is possible to do machine level, like resource level monitoring through the stack? Of course, I assume you can send the data to Gigapipe and it will take the data. But what is the preferred way to do resource level monitoring, memory, CPU, whatnot, so I can have everything in one place?
There's a lot of different collectors, and some of them are more lightweight than others. Like I was saying, Vector has some
Mm.
built in. Vector might not always be the most lightweight one, uh, but like the formats that are being used to send this data are very simple to understand and very simple to build. So if all you are interested in is in CPU or memory or network, then you could very easily build a lightweight just collector that runs a quick command, and then makes it into the format you want and just does a curl, right? You could even do a bash script that does that. That's its job, to just do that. Or you could do a eBPF monitor that every once in a while sends the result of eBPF. We've done that a few times when we've been doing troubleshooting for some tools. We wanted to know the mem usage. You just write a eBPF script that monitors the memory usage of one specific application process, and every X seconds it sends out a metric, and then you immediately see it as you're testing. Oh, I'm going to do a new version. I'm going to restart. Okay, restarted. Oh, now you see the graph go up or down depending on what changes you made. So it's very lightweight if you really want to just get started and get your fingers wet. I know you're an application engineer, so you're just thinking on, okay, what else could I write that could do this real quick?
Yeah, I think there's a lot really. Really a lot you can do around this, and it's really very interesting. And I think again, my takeaway here is you need observability almost before your platform starts working. Don't do it after. Do it before. Do it during development. It's going to save you a lot of headaches, together with testing and whatnot. The
Yeah.
observability from the get go, before you figure out your stack, just put it there. Start shipping out logs. It's always going to save you one way or another. So, where can people meet you? When is your next conferences? Any travel coming up? Any?
Well, we try to be wherever people are. So I think we're going to be at the mobile, what is it called, Mobile World Conference in Barcelona. There will be some
Okay.
people there that you can talk to. We'll definitely be at ClueCon. You can expect an interesting talk and an interesting workshop again. That's at least what we're aiming for. You know us, we always have something special up our sleeves.
Yeah, and it's always fun.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and just have a look out. We usually try to see, specifically, like we had a talk at AstriCon. We had a recent talk. I don't remember just now, but another conference. I'm sure OpenSIPs will have some people go again. So there's lots of stuff going on for us. Yeah,
Yeah, super. Well, then I'll see you at ClueCon probably because
definitely.
I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make the Open Sips Summit this year, but it's I'm certainly happy to have you, and it's always great and it's great to meet, and it's a great product, it's a great project, and I have to stress, and I don't want to say this in a flattering way, but it's also a great people. Like your team is just fantastic. So go talk to Jachen, go talk to the other guys, and there's always something new to learn.
Yeah,
Well, thank you very much for joining us today. It was great. It's always great to hear from such an important project.
thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me, and I really enjoy ClueCon. It's a really good conference. So if you don't go, you're missing out.
Well, you can always watch videos, but it's not the same thing.
Yes, yeah, that's true.
Cool. So thank you very much, everybody. And thank you, Jackson, for joining us today. And the rest of the people, I'll see you next week. Goodbye.